In rural Oakridge, Kansas, a 72-year-old grandmother was about to experience the ultimate betrayal from family she thought she could trust. What began as a simple living arrangement turned into a nightmare when her daughter-in-law threw her cherished belongings into the yard and coldly told her to find somewhere else to live. Eleanor Whitaker wasn't an ordinary grandmother. For over 15 years, she had built a successful bakery business worth nearly $1 million, known throughout 3 counties for her renowned recipes and business acumen. When her daughter-in-law discarded her possessions like worthless trash, she had no idea she was setting in motion the most calculated response in family history. Eleanor's methodical plan would forever change their financial expectations. What started as heartless disrespect would transform into perfect justice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Whitaker stood at her bedroom window, watching the first light of dawn illuminate the sprawling Oakridge property she now called home. At 72, she still moved with purpose, though her morning routine of organizing her personal space had taken longer than usual. Her prized recipe collection sat neatly arranged on the antique desk by the window, generations of family secrets bound in leather notebooks worth more than just sentimental value. "They're awake," she murmured to herself, hearing movement from the main part of the house. She smoothed her favorite cardigan and checked her appearance in the small mirror. The lines around her eyes had deepened since moving in with her son 6 months ago, but her silver hair was neatly styled, and her posture remained dignified despite everything. She'd spent 2 days preparing for this weekend visit from her other children. She had cleaned her modest bedroom in the East Wing, prepared special breakfasts, and even baked her famous cinnamon rolls that had launched her bakery empire 15 years earlier. Eleanor's sweet creations had grown from a small storefront into a chain of 6 bakeries across Kansas, each one profitable, each one built through her determination after her husband's death. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Eleanor recognized her son Michael's distinctive gait. At 49, he carried himself with the strained confidence of a man perpetually trying to impress his wife rather than being true to himself. Eleanor had raised him to be independent, perhaps too independent. Now that strength had been eroded by his marriage to Rebecca, a woman who saw Eleanor as nothing more than an inconvenience. "Mom," Michael's voice carried a forced cheerfulness as he appeared in the doorway. "You're up early. Rebecca's making breakfast for everyone." Behind him, Eleanor caught a glimpse of Rebecca, her movements sharp and annoyed as she banged pots in the kitchen. At 45, Rebecca possessed a domineering presence that had slowly pushed everyone else aside in her quest to control the Whitaker household. "I thought I'd make my cinnamon rolls," Eleanor said quietly. "The ones everyone loves." Michael's face tightened slightly. "Rebecca's got it covered, Mom. She's making her protein pancakes. Health conscious, you know." Through the window, Eleanor spotted her daughter Jennifer's SUV turning up the long driveway, kicking up dust from the gravel road. At 46, Jennifer arrived with her usual punctuality, her husband Thomas following in their second car. Their teenage children, Max and Lily, emerged reluctantly from the vehicle, already absorbed in their phones. Eleanor's youngest son Patrick's motorcycle brought up the rear, its engine announcing his arrival with a distinctive rumble. At 42, Patrick approached family gatherings with the carefree attitude of someone determined to remain unattached and unburdened by responsibility. "Welcome, everyone," Eleanor called, making her way to the front door, arms open for embraces. Michael's hug was quick and distracted, clearly uncomfortable with showing affection in front of Rebecca. Jennifer's embrace lingered longer, heavy with unspoken concern about Eleanor's living situation. Patrick's was exuberant and warm, smelling of the open road and freedom. "Grandma." Lily's genuine enthusiasm cut through the adult tension. At 15, Eleanor's youngest grandchild still possessed the warmth that her parents seemed to have misplaced somewhere along the way. "I brought my recipe notebook. Can you show me how to make those chocolate eclairs you're famous for?" "Of course, darling," Eleanor replied, her voice warming. "I thought we might bake together tomorrow morning." Rebecca was already interjecting from the kitchen doorway. "We have a pretty full schedule this weekend, Lily. Your father and I planned some family activities that don't involve being stuck in a hot kitchen." Eleanor pretended not to notice the dismissal in Rebecca's tone. She'd heard that edge too many times over the past 6 months, since she'd sold her home and moved into Michael and Rebecca's sprawling farmhouse. The arrangement had seemed sensible at the time. The house had a separate wing that offered Eleanor privacy while providing company as she aged. What she hadn't anticipated was Rebecca's growing resentment at having her mother-in-law on her property. Jennifer was already on her phone, responding to work emails with the focused attention of a corporate attorney who never truly disconnected. "Mom, the house looks lovely. How are you settling in? She asked without looking up from her screen. It's been an adjustment, Eleanor replied carefully, aware of Rebecca hovering nearby. But I'm grateful for the company. Patrick was examining the family photographs lining the hallway, many of which had been relegated to this back corridor rather than displayed prominently in the main living areas as Eleanor would have preferred. Hey, remember this fishing trip? He laughed, pointing to a faded image of himself and Michael as boys. Dad was so patient with us even when we couldn't sit still for more than 5 minutes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The mention of their father, Harold, brought a momentary silence to the room. He had been gone for 17 years now, but his absence still created a pause in family conversations. Eleanor had built her bakery business from scratch after his death, transforming his life insurance money into a thriving enterprise that had put all 3 children through college and established her financial independence. Harold would have loved this place, Eleanor said softly. All this open space. Speaking of space, Rebecca interjected, Michael and I have been talking about converting your wing into a home gym and office area. The contractor thinks it would add significant value to the property. Eleanor felt the first chill of unease settle in her stomach. My wing? But that's where I'm living. Well, long term, Rebecca continued with forced casualness, we thought you might be more comfortable in a retirement community. With people your own age. Professional care available. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Eleanor caught Jennifer's startled expression and Patrick's frown. Michael stood awkwardly between his wife and mother, clearly having had this conversation with Rebecca in private but unprepared to have it now, in front of everyone. I see, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the shock. And when were you planning to discuss this with me? It's just an idea we've been exploring, Michael said quickly. Nothing decided yet. Rebecca's smile didn't reach her eyes. We should eat before the food gets cold. Everyone to the table. Breakfast progressed. With the careful choreography of a family that had perfected the art of avoiding real conversation. Rebecca dominated discussions with stories of her community committee work and charity fundraisers, her voice growing louder as she established her position as the matriarch of the house. Jennifer deflected questions about her demanding legal career with practiced ease, while Patrick entertained the teenagers with stories of his latest motorcycle adventure. Eleanor watched it all with growing clarity. She had raised these children, built a business that had supported them all, and now sat at the table like a guest rather than the family cornerstone she had always been. Eleanor, Rebecca's voice cut through her thoughts, didn't you say you were going to sort through some of your things in the garage? There's barely room for Michael's car with all those boxes of yours. My business files, Eleanor clarified. And some family heirlooms. I brought when I sold my house. It's been 6 months, Rebecca said with a thin smile. Perhaps this weekend would be a good time for everyone to help you decide what to keep and what to let go of. Eleanor recognized the tone. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. Her boxes, containing the history of her business, her late husband's belongings, and treasured family items, were an inconvenience to be eliminated. I'd be happy to help you organize, Mom, Jennifer offered, sensing the tension. Me too, Patrick added. We could set up some shelving or something. Rebecca's smile tightened. Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of downsizing. Eleanor won't have room for all this in a retirement apartment anyway. Retirement apartment? Jennifer's gaze sharpened. Is that decided? Michael looked uncomfortable. We're just exploring options. After breakfast, Eleanor retreated to her wing of the house, ostensibly to prepare for the day but really to process what was happening. Through her window, she could see Rebecca in animated conversation with Michael near the garage, gesturing toward the boxes of Eleanor's possessions that had been stored there since her move. Jennifer appeared in Eleanor's doorway, her expression concerned. Mom, what's going on here? Are you okay living with them? Eleanor hesitated. She had never been one to complain, never wanted to burden her children with her problems. It's been challenging. Rebecca has certain ideas about how things should be. That's putting it mildly, Jennifer said, closing the door behind her. Patrick and I have been worried. You seem different since you moved in here. Quieter. Smaller. Somehow. I'm adjusting, Eleanor replied, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Mom, you built a business from nothing. You supported all of us after Dad died. You're not someone who just adjusts to being pushed aside. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lily peeked in, her expression brightening at the sight of her grandmother. Grandma, can I see your recipe books? The ones you used for the bakeries? Eleanor smiled genuinely for the first time that day. Of course, darling. They're right here. She gestured to the leather-bound collection on her desk, each one filled with recipes she had perfected over decades, the foundation of a business that had grown to be valued at nearly $1 million before she'd sold it to a regional food corporation 3 years earlier. Lily ran her fingers reverently over the embossed covers. "These are like your life's work." "They are," Eleanor agreed. "Each recipe has a story. The cinnamon rolls were your grandfather's favorite. The chocolate eclairs won the state fair competition in 2007. The lemon tarts paid for your mother's law school." Jennifer laughed softly. "That's true. Mom's lemon tarts financed my final year at KU." The door opened wider, and Rebecca stood there, her expression making it clear she'd been listening. "Lily, your father's looking for you. He wants to show you the new riding mower." After Lily reluctantly left, Rebecca remained in the doorway. "Those old recipes can't be good for anyone's health nowadays. All that butter and sugar. Times have changed, Eleanor." The dismissal of her life's work stung more than Eleanor cared to admit. "Some things are timeless, Rebecca. Quality and care never go out of style." Rebecca's smile was cold. "Well, speaking of style, I wanted to discuss redecorating this wing. If we're going to convert it, we should start planning the aesthetic." "Rebecca," Jennifer interjected, "Mom just moved in 6 months ago. Don't you think it's premature to be talking about displacing her?" "Displacing?" Rebecca's eyebrows rose. "I'm talking about what's best for everyone. Eleanor would receive better care in a senior living community. She'd have friends her own age, activities, medical staff on hand." "I don't need medical staff," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm in perfect health. For now," Rebecca replied. "But at your age, things can change quickly. Michael and I are thinking ahead." The implication was clear: Eleanor was a burden, a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket, suffocating in its weight. "I think," Eleanor said carefully, "that any decisions about my living arrangements should include me in the conversation." Rebecca's smile didn't waver. "Of course. That's why we're discussing it now." The afternoon brought a temporary reprieve as the family scattered across the property. Patrick took the teenagers for a ride on his motorcycle, one at a time around the perimeter of the farm. Jennifer retreated to the porch with her laptop, catching up on work. Michael disappeared to his workshop, where he tinkered with projects he rarely completed. Eleanor found herself alone in the kitchen, preparing dinner despite Rebecca's insistence that she had it under control. Cooking had always been Eleanor's sanctuary, the place where she felt most confident and creative. As she chopped vegetables for a stew, Harold's old recipe, she could hear Rebecca on the phone in the next room, her voice carrying clearly. "No, the contractor can't start that soon anyway." "Yes, the East Wing renovation." "Well, we're working on that. She's being a bit difficult. Of course she'll have to move out during construction, and once she sees how nice the retirement community is." Eleanor's knife paused mid-chop. They weren't just discussing possibilities. They had already spoken to contractors, made plans, decided her future without her input or consent. The realization burned like ice in her veins. For 17 years since Harold's death, she had been independent, successful, strong. She had built a business, supported her family, made her own decisions. Now, 6 months in her son's home, and she was being treated like an incompetent child, whose wishes were inconvenient obstacles to be overcome. Through the window, she could see Michael showing Patrick something in the workshop, their gestures animated. Jennifer sat on the porch, occasionally glancing toward the kitchen with concern. Eleanor wondered how much her daughter had suspected, how much she had missed in her busy life. The sound of the garage door opening drew Eleanor's attention. Rebecca emerged carrying a box of Eleanor's possessions, which she placed decisively by the trash cans. Eleanor set down her knife and walked outside. "Rebecca, what are you doing with my things?" Rebecca hardly paused. "Just clearing some space, Eleanor. These old business files are taking up room we need. Those files contain the history of my company. Financial records, awards, press clippings. A company you sold 3 years ago," Rebecca pointed out. "Why keep all this paperwork? It's just gathering dust." Eleanor reached for the box. "These are my memories. My life's work." "It's clutter," Rebecca said firmly. "And this house has too much of it already." Eleanor felt something shift inside her, a quiet strength she had temporarily forgotten she possessed. "I'd like you to put my things back, please." Rebecca straightened, meeting Eleanor's gaze directly. "Michael and I have discussed this. The garage needs clearing out. These boxes are the first step. Next, we'll tackle your wing." "My wing?" Eleanor repeated. "The space that was supposed to be my home?" "A temporary arrangement," Rebecca said dismissively. "We found several excellent retirement communities within driving distance. There's one with a small kitchenette where you could still bake occasionally. On a small scale, of course. The condescension in Rebecca's tone was unmistakable. Eleanor's business, the enterprise that had employed dozens of people, won national recognition, and provided financial security for her family, reduced to an elderly woman's hobby to be accommodated in a tiny kitchenette. I see, Eleanor said quietly. And when were you planning to tell me about these retirement communities? We're telling you now, Rebecca replied with false brightness. In fact, we've scheduled a tour for next week. I'm sure once you see how nice they are, Mom? Rebecca? Jennifer's voice interrupted them as she approached from the porch. What's going on? Eleanor turned to her daughter, suddenly aware of how this scene must look, an elderly mother arguing with her daughter-in-law over a box of old papers. The indignity of it struck her forcefully. Nothing to worry about, Rebecca said smoothly. Just doing some necessary cleaning. Jennifer looked at the box, then at her mother's face. Those are Mom's business files. Her bakery built that business from nothing. A business she sold, Rebecca emphasized. It's time to move forward, not live in the past. Before either could respond, Michael and Patrick approached from the workshop, drawn by the tension they could sense even from a distance. What's happening? Michael asked, looking between his wife and mother. Your wife is throwing away my business records, Eleanor said evenly. And apparently has been making plans to move me to a retirement home without consulting me. Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom, it's not like that. We've just been researching options. For the future. The very near future. Rebecca corrected. The contractor needs to know when he can start on the renovation. Patrick stepped forward, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by something harder. Renovation? What renovation? We're converting Mom's wing into a home. Gym and office space, Michael explained, not meeting anyone's eyes. It'll add value to the property. And where is Mom supposed to live? Jennifer demanded. There are excellent senior living communities, Rebecca began. Stop. Eleanor's voice wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of a woman who had run a successful business for 15 years. This is not a decision anyone gets to make for me. Rebecca's smile was thin and patronizing. Eleanor, at your age, it's important to have proper care. We're just looking out for your best interests. My best interests? Eleanor repeated. Like throwing away my business records is in my best interest? Like making plans to renovate my living space without consulting me is in my best interest? The tension hung in the air like an approaching storm. Eleanor looked at her 3 children, Michael avoiding her gaze, Jennifer's expression a mixture of concern and growing anger, Patrick openly glaring at Rebecca. I think, Eleanor said carefully, that we should continue this discussion later. When everyone has had time to calm down. As the family dispersed, Eleanor retrieved her box of business records and returned to her wing of the house. She sat at her desk, surrounded by the recipe books that had built her fortune, and felt something crystallize within her, a clarity of purpose she hadn't experienced since deciding to open her first bakery after Harold's death. She had made the mistake of assuming that family ties guaranteed respect. She had handed over control of her living situation without securing her independence. She had trusted without verification. These were business errors she never would have made in her professional life. The realization didn't bring anger, at least, not yet. Instead, it brought a cold, clear certainty about what needed to happen next. Eleanor Whitaker had built a business empire from scratch once before. She could certainly engineer a solution to this situation. As evening approached, Eleanor heard the family gathering for dinner. Rebecca's voice carried down the hallway, directing everyone to their places, establishing her control over the household with each instruction. Eleanor took a deep breath and joined them, her face composed into a mask of calm. Eleanor, Rebecca said with false warmth, I've set you next to Lily. I know how you two enjoy your baking discussions. The dinner table conversation flowed around Eleanor like water around a stone. She observed her family with new eyes, Michael's constant deference to Rebecca, Jennifer's worried glances, Patrick's barely concealed irritation, and the teenagers' obvious discomfort with the underlying tension. I've been thinking, Eleanor said during a lull in conversation, about what you said regarding retirement communities, Rebecca. Rebecca's expression brightened with triumph. I knew you'd see reason. They really are lovely places. Actually, Eleanor continued calmly, I've been thinking I should look into buying a small place of my own again. Something manageable but independent. The table fell silent. Michael looked up from his plate, surprise evident on his face. Mom, we discussed this when you sold your house. The maintenance, the expenses, the isolation, it doesn't make sense for someone your age to live alone. I managed quite well for 17 years after your father died, Eleanor pointed out. built a business, maintained a home, and stayed actively connected to my community. That was different, Rebecca interjected. You were younger then. Eleanor's smile didn't waver. I'm considering my options. That's all. Later that evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she heard raised voices from the main part of the house. Michael and Rebecca were arguing, their words occasionally clear enough to understand. She's your mother, Michael. You can't just ship her off because it's inconvenient to have her here. That's not what this is about, Jennifer. We're thinking of her well-being. No, you're thinking about a home gym. Patrick, back me up here. This whole thing is messed up. Mom built her business to support all of us. She paid for our college, helped with down payments on houses, bailed Michael out when his first business failed. And this is how we repay her? Eleanor closed her door, not wanting to hear more. The lines were being drawn, the family fracturing along fault lines that had always existed but had remained hidden beneath the surface of polite interaction. She sat at her desk and began to write, making notes and calculations with the same precision she had once applied to her business ledgers. If her children thought her incapable of managing her own affairs, they had dramatically underestimated the woman who had turned a small bakery into a regional success story. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but the atmosphere in the house remained strained. Eleanor rose early, preparing her famous cinnamon rolls despite Rebecca's meal plan for the weekend. The familiar routine of mixing, kneading, and baking centered her, reminding her of who she was beyond Michael's elderly mother or Rebecca's inconvenient in-law. As the family gathered for breakfast, drawn by the irresistible scent of freshly baked goods, Eleanor observed the dynamics with renewed clarity. Rebecca's irritation at the disruption of her planned protein breakfast. Michael's obvious enjoyment of his mother's baking despite his attempts to hide it from his wife. Jennifer and Patrick's open appreciation. The teenager's delight. Grandma, these are amazing, Max said through a mouthful of cinnamon roll. Mom says your recipes made you famous. Not famous, Eleanor corrected with a smile. But successful. People appreciate quality and tradition. Speaking of tradition, Rebecca interjected, we should discuss our schedule for the day. I've planned a family hike and picnic. Actually, Eleanor said calmly, I was hoping Jennifer might help me look at some paperwork this morning. Legal matters. Jennifer looked up, surprised but immediately alert. Of course, Mom. What kind of paperwork? Just some ideas I've been considering. About my living arrangements and assets. Rebecca's expression sharpened with interest. Assets? Michael mentioned you invested most of the money from selling your business. I did, Eleanor confirmed without elaborating. After breakfast, Eleanor and Jennifer retreated to Eleanor's wing. Once the door was closed, Eleanor revealed the notes she'd made the previous night. Mom, what is this? Jennifer asked, scanning the pages of calculations and plans. My exit strategy, Eleanor replied simply. I need your legal expertise. Jennifer looked up, her expression a mixture of concern and growing understanding. You're planning to move out. I should never have moved in, Eleanor said without rancor. It was a mistake to assume that family ties guaranteed respect. Rebecca sees me as an inconvenience, an obstacle to her plans for this house. Michael lacks the courage to stand up for me. It's time I took control of my own situation again. Mom, I had no idea things were this bad. Why didn't you say something sooner? Eleanor smiled sadly. Pride, perhaps. Or hope that things would improve. But yesterday made the situation perfectly clear. Rebecca has been making plans to move me out since shortly after I moved in. The boxes in the garage, my wing of the house, they were never meant to be permanent. I was meant to be temporary. Jennifer reviewed her mother's notes with growing admiration. Mom, these calculations are impressive. You've thought of everything. I ran a successful business for 15 years, dear. I know how to plan. The notes detailed Eleanor's financial situation, the investments she'd made with the proceeds. From selling her bakery business, the potential housing options she'd researched, the legal steps needed to secure her independence. It was comprehensive, practical, and demonstrated a clarity of thought that defied any suggestion of diminished capacity. I'll help however I can, Jennifer said firmly. And I know Patrick will too. But what about Michael? Michael made his choice when he allowed his wife to throw my belongings away and plan my removal without consulting me, Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the pain behind the words. He'll have to live with the consequences of that choice. Before Jennifer could respond, the door to Eleanor's room burst open without a knock. Rebecca stood there, her expression thunderous. What's going on in here? The family is waiting to leave for our hike. Eleanor met her daughter-in-law's gaze calmly. Jennifer is helping me with some legal matters. We'll join you later. Rebecca's eyes narrowed as she spotted the papers spread across the desk. Legal matters? What kind of legal matters? Private ones, Eleanor replied. There are no private matters in this house, Rebecca said, stepping forward. Michael and I have a right to know what you're planning, especially if it involves family assets. Jennifer stood, using her full height and professional demeanor to create a barrier between Rebecca and the desk. As Mom's attorney in this matter, I have to ask you to respect client confidentiality. Attorney? Rebecca's voice rose. This is ridiculous. We're family, not adversaries. Are we? Eleanor asked quietly. Is that how you treat family, Rebecca? Making plans to displace them without their knowledge? Throwing away their possessions? Dismissing their life's work as clutter? Rebecca's face flushed. I've been nothing but accommodating. We opened our home to you when you couldn't manage on your own anymore. I was managing perfectly well, Eleanor corrected. The decision to sell my house and move in here was based on Michael's suggestion that it would be better for everyone, that I wouldn't be alone, that we could be closer as a family. It was never because I couldn't manage. Well, regardless, Rebecca said, regaining her composure, this is our house, and we get to decide how it's used. If we want to convert the east wing into a gym, that's our right. Absolutely, Eleanor agreed, surprising Rebecca. It is your house. Which is why I'll be moving out. Rebecca stared at her for a moment, then smiled with obvious relief. Well, finally, some sense. I have brochures from several excellent retirement communities. Not a retirement community, Eleanor interrupted. My own place. Independent living. The smile dropped from Rebecca's face. That's not practical. You're 72. Living alone isn't safe or sensible at your age. It's not your decision to make, Jennifer interjected. Mom is perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. Michael, Rebecca called sharply. Michael, come in here right now. Heavy footsteps approached, and Michael appeared in the doorway, his expression wary as he took in the scene, his wife clearly agitated, his sister in lawyer mode, his mother calmly collected. What's going on? He asked. Your mother is talking about moving out. Getting her own place. At her age. You need to talk some sense into her. Michael looked uncertainly between his wife and mother. Mom, we've discussed this. The retirement communities have activities, care when you need it, I don't need care, Eleanor said firmly. I need respect. Something I haven't received in this house. That's not fair, Michael protested. Isn't it? Patrick's voice joined the conversation as he appeared behind Michael. I just found Rebecca throwing more of Mom's things into trash bags. Photograph albums this time. Family history. All eyes turned to Rebecca, who had the grace to look momentarily flustered before recovering. I was organizing, not throwing away. Those albums are water damaged and need to be digitized. They're in perfect condition, Patrick contradicted. I checked. Eleanor stood, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. This discussion is over. Jennifer and I have work to do. Legal work. I suggest the rest of you go on your hike as planned. Mom, Michael began. Not now, Michael, Eleanor said. Her voice gentle but firm. We'll talk later, when everyone has calmed down. As Rebecca pulled Michael away, muttering about ingratitude and manipulation, Patrick lingered in the doorway. You okay, Mom? He asked quietly. Eleanor smiled at her youngest son, seeing in him the spark of independence she'd always tried to nurture in her children. I'm better than okay, Patrick. I'm finally seeing things clearly. After they left, Jennifer looked at her mother with new respect. I don't think I've ever seen you stand up to anyone like that before. I've never needed to, Eleanor replied simply. Your father and I respected each other. My business partners valued my expertise. My children, until recently, treated me with consideration. But sometimes, Jennifer, you have to remind people who you are. I'm not just Michael's elderly mother or Rebecca's inconvenient in-law. I'm Eleanor Whitaker, and I built something valuable from nothing once before. I can certainly do it again. With renewed purpose, Eleanor and Jennifer spent the morning reviewing options and making plans. By lunchtime, they had outlined a clear strategy for Eleanor's independence, financial, legal, and practical. As they worked, Lily appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. Grandma? Can I come in? Of course, darling, Eleanor said, gesturing her granddaughter inside. What's wrong? I heard Mom and Aunt Rebecca arguing, Lily said hesitantly. About you moving out. Is it true? Eleanor exchanged a glance with Jennifer, then nodded. Yes, it's true. I've decided it's time for me to have my own place again. But why? Don't you like living with us? Eleanor chose her words carefully, aware of how easily family conflicts could damage the youngest members. It's not about liking or not liking, Lily. It's about what's right for everyone. Your Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Michael have their own vision for their home, and I have my own needs. Sometimes the kindest thing people can do is give each other space. But we'll still see you, right? Lily's concern was palpable. Of course you will, Jennifer assured her daughter. Grandma isn't going far. In fact, she'll probably have more time for baking lessons once she has her own kitchen again. Lily's expression brightened slightly. You promise? I promise, Eleanor said firmly. Some things are too important to let go. Family is one of them, real family, built on respect and love, not just blood relations. As Lily left, Jennifer looked at her mother thoughtfully. You know, Mom, I've been thinking. Patrick and I should have seen what was happening here sooner. We should have checked in more, paid attention to the dynamics. You have your own lives, Eleanor said without accusation. And I'm an adult, not a child who needs monitoring. The mistake was mine, assuming that Michael and Rebecca's invitation meant genuine welcome rather than convenience and control. The sound of the front door opening announced the family's return from their hike. Eleanor squared her shoulders, ready for the next round of confrontation. It didn't take long. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her expression falsely pleasant. Eleanor, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Anything you have to say can be said in front of Jennifer, Eleanor replied calmly. Rebecca's smile tightened. Fine. Michael and I have been talking, and we think there's been a misunderstanding. Of course we want you to be happy here. The retirement community was just one option we were exploring. The sudden change in approach was transparent. To Eleanor, who had negotiated enough business deals to recognize a tactical retreat. Is that so? And what about the contractor who's waiting to start renovating my wing? Rebecca faltered slightly. That's still in the planning stages. Nothing definite. I see, Eleanor said. And my possessions? The boxes you've been throwing away? The photo albums Patrick found in trash bags? A misunderstanding, Rebecca insisted. I was organizing, not discarding. Eleanor studied her daughter-in-law, seeing clearly the calculation behind the sudden shift. Rebecca had realized that Eleanor's financial assets might be at stake, assets that Rebecca had likely been counting on eventually flowing to Michael and, by extension, to her. Well, Eleanor said carefully, since there's been such a significant misunderstanding, perhaps it's best if I remove myself from the situation entirely. Jennifer has been helping me look at housing options. I think it's time I had my own space again. Rebecca's pleasant facade cracked slightly. That's completely unnecessary. This is your home now, is it? Eleanor asked quietly. Because yesterday you made it very clear that my presence here was temporary at best, an inconvenience at worst. I never said, you didn't have to say it, Eleanor interrupted gently. Your actions spoke clearly enough. Michael appeared behind his wife, his expression conflicted. Mom, please. Let's all calm down and discuss this rationally. I am perfectly calm, Eleanor assured him. And I've made my decision. I'll be moving out within the month. Moving where? Michael demanded. You can't just decide something like this without consulting us. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Eleanor smiled sadly at her son. The way you and Rebecca consulted me about renovating my living space? The way you consulted me about retirement communities? The way Rebecca consulted me before throwing away my possessions? Michael had the grace to look ashamed. That's different. No, Eleanor said firmly. It's exactly the same. The difference is that I'm making decisions about my own life, not someone else's. Rebecca's calculated approach gave way to frustration. This is ridiculous. We've provided you with a home, with family, with support. And this is how you repay us? By creating drama and division? Eleanor remained unruffled. I'm not creating anything, Rebecca. I'm responding to a situation you created when you decided that my needs and wishes were inconvenient obstacles to your plans. The confrontation might have escalated further if not for a small voice from the hallway. Stop it. Just stop fighting. Everyone turned to see Lily standing there, tears streaming down her face. Why are you being so mean to Grandma? She's the nicest person in the world, and you're treating her like she doesn't matter. Lily, this is adult business, Rebecca said sharply. You don't understand, I understand everything. Lily shot back with teenage defiance. You're exaggerating, Rebecca insisted. We were exploring options, not making final decisions. The contractor for my wing renovation would disagree, Eleanor replied calmly. As would anyone who saw you throwing away my possessions. A heavy silence filled the room. Eleanor could see the calculations happening behind Rebecca's eyes, weighing the financial implications, the family dynamics, the potential loss of control. What exactly are you planning to do? Rebecca finally asked. I'm going to buy a small house in town. Something manageable but independent. I've already spoken with Jennifer about the legal aspects, and I'll be meeting with my financial advisor on Monday. Michael looked stunned. Just like that? After everything we've done for you? Eleanor felt a wave of sadness for her son. This man who had somehow convinced himself that providing grudging accommodation for 6 months outweighed her decades of support and sacrifice. Michael, I paid for your college education. I funded your first business venture when it failed. I helped with the down payment on this very house. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, but to remind you that family support goes both ways. What I've received here hasn't been support, it's been tolerance at best, resentment at worst. That's not true, Michael protested weakly. It is true, Eleanor said gently. And the saddest part is that you can't even see it. Rebecca's face had taken on a calculating expression. What about your investments? The money from selling? Your business? What are you planning to do with that? And there it was, the real concern laid bare. Not Eleanor's welfare, not family unity, but the money. The inheritance that Rebecca had clearly been counting on. My financial plans are my own business, Eleanor said firmly. But I will tell you this, I've learned a valuable lesson about assuming that family ties guarantee respect or consideration. I'll be making my decisions accordingly. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Michael's face paled as he finally grasped what his mother was saying, that his inheritance, the money he and Rebecca had likely been counting on, was now in jeopardy. Mom, you can't be serious. You wouldn't cut me out of your will over a misunderstanding about living arrangements. Eleanor looked at her son with genuine sadness. This isn't about living arrangements, Michael. It's about respect. It's about seeing me as a person with agency and dignity, not an inconvenience to be managed or an asset to be acquired. Rebecca's composure finally cracked. This is emotional manipulation. You're threatening to disinherit your own son because I wanted to create a home gym? Because I suggested a retirement community might be more appropriate for someone your age? No, Eleanor said quietly. I'm reevaluating my relationship with both of you because when I was vulnerable, when I had given up my home and moved into yours, you saw it not as an opportunity to care for family but as a chance to control and diminish me. The three sat in silence, the truth of Eleanor's words settling around them like dust after an explosion. Outside, the Kansas wind rustled through the cottonwood trees that lined the property, the same trees that had witnessed 3 generations of Whitaker family history, now witnessing its fracture. I'll be staying with Jennifer until I find my own place, Eleanor said, rising from her chair. I'll pack what I need for now and arrange to collect the rest of my belongings later. Mom, please, Michael began, but Eleanor shook her head. My decision is made, Michael. The question now is what decisions you will make going forward. As Eleanor walked to her wing to pack an overnight bag, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, like lancing a wound to release the poison within. For 6 months, she had diminished herself, retreated into a smaller version of Eleanor Whitaker in an attempt to accommodate Rebecca's domain. No more. In her room, Eleanor carefully packed her recipe books, the foundation of her business empire and the record of her life's work. As she placed them in her bag, she heard a soft knock at the door. Grandma? It was Lily, her eyes red from crying. Are you really leaving? Eleanor set down her bag and opened her arms. Lily rushed into them, burying her face against her grandmother's shoulder. Just for a little while, sweetheart. Until I find my own place. I don't want you to go, Lily whispered. Who's going to teach me to bake? Who's going to tell me stories about when Dad was little? I'll still do all those things, Eleanor promised. I'm not disappearing from your life, Lily. I'm just changing where I live. Because Aunt Rebecca was mean to you. Eleanor chose her words carefully. Because adults sometimes have different ideas about how things should be. Your Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Michael want their house a certain way, and I need to be in a place where I can be myself fully. Lily looked up, her young face serious. Mom says what Aunt Rebecca did was elder abuse. Is that true? Eleanor blinked in surprise. The term hadn't occurred to her, but now that Lily said it aloud, she recognized the truth in it. The systematic discarding of her possessions, the plans made without her consent, the gradual erosion of her autonomy, they were forms of elder abuse, subtle but real. It's complicated, Lily. But the important thing is that I'm taking steps to protect myself and my independence. That's what strong women do when faced with difficult situations. Like when you started your bakery after Grandpa died. Eleanor smiled, touched that Lily knew that part of her history. Exactly like that. Sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the most important decisions. When Jennifer arrived to pick up Eleanor, the scene in the driveway was tense. Michael stood awkwardly by the garage, clearly torn between loyalty to his wife and concern for his mother. Rebecca watched from the porch, her expression a mixture of anger and calculation. Patrick helped load Eleanor's bags into Jennifer's car, his movements purposeful and determined. "This isn't over," Rebecca called as Eleanor prepared to leave. "You can't just walk away from family." Eleanor turned to face her daughter-in-law one last time. "I'm not walking away from family, Rebecca. I'm walking toward self-respect. There's a difference." As Jennifer drove away from the farmhouse, Eleanor watched the property recede in the side mirror. For 6 months, she had tried to make it her home, only to discover that she had been seen as a temporary inconvenience from the beginning. "Are you okay, Mom?" Jennifer asked quietly. Eleanor considered the question. She had lost her living space, confronted painful truths about her son's character, and upended what she had thought would be a peaceful arrangement for her later years. Yet beneath the sadness and disappointment, she felt something unexpected: freedom. "I will be," she said with quiet certainty. "This isn't the first time I've had to rebuild. After your father died, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning in a new way. I suspect this is similar." Jennifer reached over and squeezed her mother's hand. "You know Patrick and I will help however we can." "I know," Eleanor said, squeezing back. "But the most important work I need to do myself." The next 2 weeks unfolded with the steady purpose that had characterized Eleanor's approach to business. Staying in Jennifer's guest room, she methodically reconstructed her independence, piece by piece. Her first meeting was with Edward Barnes, the financial advisor who had helped her invest the proceeds from selling her bakery business. At 72, Eleanor had substantial assets, the result of smart business decisions and careful planning after Harold's death. "I want to be absolutely clear about my financial position," she told Edward as they reviewed her portfolio. "And I want to make some changes to my estate planning." Edward nodded, unsurprised. News traveled quickly in small towns, and Eleanor's situation with Michael and Rebecca had already generated quiet discussion. "What kind of changes did you have in mind?" "I need to protect my assets while ensuring they benefit the people who have shown me genuine respect and care," Eleanor said carefully. "Michael has made his choices. I need to make mine." The revised estate plan took shape over several meetings. Michael would receive a modest sum, enough to acknowledge his place as her son but not the substantial inheritance he and Rebecca had clearly been counting on. Jennifer and Patrick would receive larger portions, reflecting their support during this difficult time. But the bulk of Eleanor's estate would now be directed toward a different purpose entirely, one that would honor Harold's memory and secure Eleanor's legacy in a way no one had anticipated. Her next meeting was with Diane Jackson, a realtor who had once supplied pies and pastries from Eleanor's bakery for her open houses. "I need something manageable but independent," Eleanor explained as they sat in Diane's office. "A small house, preferably one level, with a good kitchen. Nothing extravagant, but solidly built." Diane nodded, making notes. "Any particular area of town?" "Somewhere central," Eleanor replied. "I want to be part of the community, not isolated on the outskirts." The third piece fell into place. When Eleanor met with James Harrington, a contractor who had renovated several of her bakery locations years earlier. "I have some specific modifications in mind," she explained as they toured a promising small bungalow that Diane had found. "Wider doorways, a walk-in shower instead of a tub, good lighting throughout. I want this place to work for me now and in the future." James nodded, understanding immediately what Eleanor was planning. Universal design principles. Smart thinking, Mrs. Whitaker. Plan ahead rather than retrofit later. Throughout this process, Eleanor maintained a calm dignity that impressed everyone she encountered. There were no tearful breakdowns, no bitter tirades about ungrateful children or disrespectful daughters-in-law. Instead, she approached her situation with the same methodical problem-solving that had built her business empire. The only moments when her composure wavered came in private conversations with Jennifer and Patrick, who had rallied around their mother with protective devotion. "Michael called again," Jennifer reported one evening. "He wants to know what you're planning to do with your investments. Says he's worried about you making hasty financial decisions." Eleanor smiled sadly. "He's worried about his inheritance, not my well-being. If he were concerned about me, he would have stood up to Rebecca months ago." "He's weak," Patrick said bluntly. "Always has been when it comes to the women in his life. Remember how he let Melissa run all over him in his first marriage? That's enough," Eleanor said gently. "Michael has made his choices, and I've made mine. We don't need to disparage him." The turn in the situation came 3 weeks after Eleanor's departure from Michael and Rebecca's home. She had just signed the purchase agreement on the small bungalow in town, a charming 1940s home with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that, while modest, had good bones for renovation. "Congratulations, Mrs. Whitaker," Diane said, handing Her the keys. It's a solid investment. Properties in this neighborhood hold their value well. Eleanor held the keys in her palm, feeling their weight, not just metal, but independence, dignity, self-determination. After the turmoil of the past month, this small act of taking possession felt profound. As she and Jennifer drove to see the house as its official owner, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Michael, calling for the first time since she'd left. "Mom," his voice sounded strained, almost desperate. "We need to talk. It's important." "I'm listening," Eleanor said neutrally. "Not over the phone. Can you come to the house? Please?" Eleanor exchanged a glance with Jennifer, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. "I don't think that's a good idea, Michael. If you want to talk, we can meet somewhere neutral." "Fine," Michael said quickly. "The diner downtown? In an hour?" After ending the call, Jennifer looked concerned. "Do you want me to come with you?" Eleanor considered the question. "No, I think I need to handle this myself. But perhaps you could wait nearby, just in case." The Prairie Diner had been an Oakridge institution for decades. Eleanor had supplied their desserts for years until selling her business, and the owner, Martha, greeted her with genuine warmth. "Eleanor Whitaker. Heard you're moving back to town. Smart decision, we've missed having you around." Michael was already seated in a booth at the back, nervously shredding a paper napkin. He stood when he saw Eleanor approach, his expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Mom, thank you for coming." Eleanor slid into the booth across from her son, noticing the dark circles under his eyes and the tension in his posture. "You said it was important." Michael took a deep breath. "Rebecca's left me." Of all the things Eleanor had expected to hear, this wasn't one of them. "I'm sorry to hear that, Michael." "No, you're not," he said with unexpected insight. "And you shouldn't be. She was horrible to you." Eleanor studied her son's face, seeing real pain there but also something else, a clarity that hadn't been present before. "What happened?" she asked quietly. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Eleanor felt a pang of memory. "After you left, things got worse. Rebecca was angry, furious that you'd stood up to her, that Jennifer and Patrick had taken your side. But mostly, she was panicking about the money." "The money?" "Your money, Mom. The inheritance she assumed would eventually come to me. She'd been counting on it, had plans for renovating the entire house, buying a vacation property in Colorado. When you left and hinted that you might change your will, she lost it." Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions, sadness for her son's pain, vindication of her suspicions, and a peculiar sense of relief that the truth was finally being spoken aloud. "I started seeing everything differently," Michael continued. "The way she talked about you, the way she'd been systematically pushing you out from the moment you moved in. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I could suddenly see what everyone else had seen all along." "And you confronted her?" Michael nodded, looking down at his shredded napkin. "I told her she had to apologize to you, that what she'd done was wrong. She refused, said you were manipulating everyone with your poor helpless old lady act. We fought, the worst fight of our marriage. The next day, I came home from work and found she'd packed her things and left. She's staying with her sister in Wichita." Eleanor absorbed this information silently. She took no pleasure in her son's marital troubles, but she couldn't deny the validation it brought to her own experiences. "I'm so ashamed, Mom," Michael said, his voice breaking slightly. "I let her treat you that way. I stood by while she threw out your things, planned to renovate your space without telling you, talked about shipping you off to a retirement home. What kind of son does that?" "A son who was caught between loyalties," Eleanor said gently. "A son who made the wrong choice, but who can still make better ones going forward." Michael looked up, hope flickering across his face. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. I want to make amends. I want to try to fix what I broke, if that's even possible." Eleanor considered her son carefully. She had raised him, loved him, supported him through failures and successes. Their relationship had been damaged, perhaps severely, but was it beyond repair? "Amends aren't made through words, Michael. They're made through actions, consistent over time." "I know," he said quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just want a chance to show you that I understand how wrong I was, that I want to do better." Eleanor felt the weight of the decision before her. She could reject Michael's overture, protect herself from further disappointment. Or she could offer him the opportunity to earn back her trust, to demonstrate through actions that he truly understood what had gone wrong. "I've bought a house in town," she said finally. "It needs some work, nothing major, but updates to make it more accessible and comfortable. Perhaps you could help with that." Michael's face lit up. "Yes, absolutely. Anything you need." "Not as a contractor," Eleanor clarified. "As a son helping his mother. Not because you want something from me, but because it's the right thing to do." I understand, Michael said solemnly. And Mom, about your will, I want you to know that I don't care about the money. I mean, I care, but it's not why I'm here. If you decide to leave everything to Jennifer and Patrick, or to charity, or to whoever, that's your right. I just want a chance to be your son again. Eleanor studied him, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. Finding none, she nodded slowly. One step at a time, Michael. One step at a time. As they finished their coffee, Martha approached their table with a slice of apple pie. On the house, Eleanor. Welcome back to town. Thank you, Martha. It feels good to be coming home. The word home resonated in a way Eleanor hadn't anticipated. She had lost one home, the wing in Michael and Rebecca's house that had never truly been hers. But in the process, she was reclaiming something more important, her identity, her independence, her sense of self-worth. As she and Michael parted outside the diner, he hesitated, then asked, "Can I see it? Your new house?" Eleanor considered the request. It was a small thing, but it represented a first step toward rebuilding their damaged relationship. "Yes, I think that would be fine. Jennifer's waiting for me around the corner. We can all go together." The small bungalow sat on a tree-lined street just 4 blocks from Oakridge's main square. With its deep front porch and well-maintained yard, it exuded the quiet charm of established neighborhoods where neighbors knew each other by name and community still mattered. "It's perfect for you, Mom," Michael said as they walked through the rooms. "Cozy but not cramped. And the kitchen has potential." "That's what I thought," Eleanor agreed. "It needs some updates, but the bones are good." As they discussed possible improvements, wider doorways, better lighting, a more accessible bathroom, Eleanor observed a change in Michael's demeanor. He was engaged, respectful of her opinions, offering suggestions rather than directives. It was a small shift, but a significant one. "I could help with the renovation," he offered tentatively. "Not taking over, just helping. If you want." Eleanor exchanged a glance with Jennifer, who gave a slight nod of encouragement. "I'd appreciate that, Michael. But on my terms, with my decisions respected." "Absolutely," he agreed quickly. "Your house, your choices. I'm just the labor." As they prepared to leave, Michael paused on the front porch. "I know I have a lot to make up for, Mom. And I know words aren't enough. But I want you to know how sorry I am, not just for what happened with Rebecca, but for not seeing you for who you really are. You're not just my elderly mother who needs looking after. You're Eleanor Whitaker, who built a business from nothing, who supported all of us, who's still sharp and capable and independent. I lost sight of that, and I'm truly sorry." Eleanor felt something shift inside her, not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward it. "Thank you for saying that, Michael. Now we'll see if your actions match your words." As Jennifer drove Eleanor back to her house, they discussed the unexpected development. "Do you think he's sincere?" Jennifer asked. Eleanor considered the question carefully. "I think he wants to be. Whether he can follow through remains to be seen. Rebecca's influence runs deep. What if she comes back? Tries to reconcile with him?" "That's Michael's decision to make," Eleanor said. "But mine is made regardless. I will never again put myself in a position where my dignity and independence are compromised. Never again." Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's plan unfolded with methodical precision. The renovations on her new home began, with Michael showing up every weekend to help, not directing, not controlling, but supporting. Genuine amends made through consistent action rather than empty words. Patrick helped move Eleanor's belongings from Michael's house, including the boxes Rebecca had tried to discard. Each photograph album, each business record, each family heirloom was carefully transported to Eleanor's new home, where they would be respected rather than treated as inconvenient clutter. The most significant development, however, came during Eleanor's meeting with her lawyer, Helen Morrison, to finalize her revised estate plan. "Are you certain about these changes?" Helen asked, reviewing the documents. "This is a substantial restructuring of your assets." "I've never been more certain of anything," Eleanor replied calmly. "What happened with Michael and Rebecca showed me exactly where priorities lie. I'm simply responding accordingly." The new will reflected Eleanor's clear-sighted assessment of her relationships. Michael would receive a modest inheritance, enough to acknowledge his efforts at redemption but not the substantial sum Rebecca had been counting on. Jennifer and Patrick would receive more significant portions, reflecting their unwavering support. Anger is a starting point, Sophia, not a destination. It can fuel initial action, but it makes a poor long-term foundation. What Rebecca did, throwing out my belongings, planning to ship me off to a retirement home, it was painful, yes. But it also clarified what matters most to me: dignity, purpose, and creating something meaningful. She poured them each another cup of tea before continuing. When I built my bakery business after Harold died, it wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something that mattered, something that would outlast me. This foundation is the same. It transforms a personal hurt into a broader purpose. Sophia nodded slowly. You're using your experience to help other women avoid similar situations, giving them financial independence so they can't be treated that way. Exactly, Eleanor smiled. Financial independence isn't just about money. It's about having the resources to maintain your dignity and autonomy, especially as you age. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Sophia rose to answer it, returning moments later with an expression of surprise. Mrs. Whitaker, it's Rebecca, Michael's wife. Eleanor felt a jolt of surprise. She hadn't seen Rebecca since the confrontation 6 months earlier. After leaving Michael, Rebecca had reportedly moved to Wichita permanently, taking a job at her sister's interior design firm. Show her in, please, Eleanor said, composing herself. Rebecca entered the dining room hesitantly, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. She looked thinner, more drawn than Eleanor remembered, the polished facade showing distinct cracks. Eleanor, she began awkwardly. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected. It is, Eleanor agreed calmly. Please, have a seat. Sophia, would you mind giving us a few minutes? After Sophia discreetly withdrew, Eleanor faced her daughter-in-law across the dining table, maintaining a composed expression that revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. You have a lovely home, Rebecca offered, glancing around. It suits you. Thank you. I designed it specifically for my needs. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them until Rebecca finally spoke again. I imagine you're wondering why I'm here. I am, Eleanor confirmed. Last I heard, you were settled in Wichita. Rebecca nodded, her fingers nervously adjusting the strap of her designer handbag. I am. But I've been doing a lot of thinking over these past months. About what happened. About my role in it. Eleanor remained silent, neither encouraging nor discouraging this line of conversation. Michael and I have been talking, Rebecca continued. Not reconciling, exactly, but communicating. He's changed, Eleanor. Or maybe he's returned to who he always was before you convinced him that his mother was an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Eleanor suggested quietly. Rebecca flinched but didn't deny it. Yes. That's fair. Another silence fell, this one heavier with the weight of acknowledged truth. I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness, Rebecca finally said. I don't expect that. But I did want to say that I recognize how wrong my behavior was. Throwing out your possessions, planning to renovate your living space without consulting you, treating you as an obstacle rather than a family member, it was inexcusable. Eleanor studied her daughter-in-law carefully, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation. Finding none, she nodded slightly. Thank you for acknowledging that. Michael told me about your foundation, Rebecca continued. Using your assets to help women build financial independence. It's inspired. Thank you, Eleanor said again, still wary of Rebecca's purpose in coming. The thing is, Rebecca hesitated, then forged ahead, it made me realize something about myself. About why I behaved the way I did. I'm listening. I was raised to believe that a woman's security comes through her husband, Rebecca explained. My mother taught me to pursue men who could provide, to secure my position through marriage. When I married Michael, I saw your estate as part of that security, something that would eventually flow to us, strengthen our position. She looked down at her hands before continuing. When you moved in, it threatened that narrative. You weren't a dependent elderly mother-in-law, you were a successful woman who had built her own security. You didn't need Michael, in many ways. He had needed you. It challenged everything I had been taught to believe. Eleanor hadn't expected this level of self-awareness from Rebecca. So you responded by trying to diminish me. To make me fit the narrative you were comfortable with. Yes, Rebecca admitted. It was wrong. Deeply wrong. And I've spent these months trying to understand why I did it, why I felt so threatened by your independence and success. Eleanor considered this confession thoughtfully. What are you hoping to achieve by telling me this, Rebecca? Nothing specific, Rebecca replied. I don't expect it to change your opinion of me or your relationship with Michael. I just thought you deserved to hear it. And maybe. She hesitated, maybe other women should hear it too. What do you mean? Your foundation, Rebecca explained. You're helping women build financial independence. But there's another side to that story, women like me, raised to seek security through others rather than creating it for themselves. Maybe that perspective could be valuable too. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. In what way? I don't know exactly, Rebecca admitted. But I've been thinking about it a lot. About how my mindset led me to treat you the way I did, and how different things might have been if I'd been raised to value independence the way you clearly were. Eleanor sat back, regarding Rebecca with new interest. This wasn't the entitled, controlling woman who had thrown her belongings into trash bags 6 months earlier. This was someone who had been doing genuine self-reflection, uncomfortable as it might have been. That's an interesting perspective, Rebecca. One I hadn't considered in developing the Foundation's programs. I don't expect you to include me in any way, Rebecca said quickly. I just thought, well, sometimes understanding the obstacle is as important as overcoming it. Eleanor nodded slowly. You're right about that. As Rebecca prepared to leave, she paused at the dining room doorway. Your kitchen is beautiful, by the way. Much better than the renovation I had planned for our house. You always did have an eye for practical elegance. After Rebecca departed, Eleanor remained at the dining table, processing the unexpected conversation. Sophia returned, her expression curious. Everything okay, Mrs. Whitaker? Eleanor smiled thoughtfully. Yes, I think it was. And it's given me some ideas for the Foundation. Over the next month, Eleanor's days fell into a satisfying rhythm. Mornings were devoted to Foundation work, reviewing applications, meeting with potential mentors, developing educational programs. Afternoons often found her in her kitchen, experimenting with recipes or teaching Lily the finer points of pastry technique during after-school visits. Sunday dinners became a family tradition, with Jennifer, Patrick, and their families gathering at Eleanor's home. Michael attended too, gradually finding his place again within the family circle. He never brought up reconciliation with Rebecca, and Eleanor never asked, respecting his privacy on the matter. The most significant development came 6 weeks after Rebecca's visit, when Eleanor called a meeting of the Foundation's small board of directors, Helen Morrison, Edward Barnes, and herself, to propose an expansion of their programming. I've been thinking about our mission, she began as they gathered in her dining room. We're focused on helping women over 50 develop financial independence through entrepreneurship, which is valuable and necessary work. It's already attracting significant attention, Helen noted. The applications for our first round of grants exceeded expectations. Exactly, Eleanor agreed. But I think we need to address a deeper issue as well, the cultural messaging that leads some women to believe their security must come through others rather than themselves. Edward looked interested. You're talking about education beyond business skills. I am, Eleanor confirmed. I'm proposing a new branch of programming focused on financial literacy and independence for younger women, high school and college age, to help reshape those narratives before they become entrenched. Helen leaned forward, intrigued. What prompted this expansion? It's somewhat outside our original scope. Eleanor hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. A conversation with Rebecca, actually. She helped me understand that part of what drove her behavior toward me was a deeply ingrained belief that security comes through attachment to others, not through one's own capabilities. Rebecca came to see you? Edward asked, surprised. She did. And while I'm not ready to call it a reconciliation, it was a conversation that offered valuable perspective. The board discussed the proposal thoroughly, eventually agreeing to develop a pilot program targeting high school girls, teaching financial literacy and entrepreneurial thinking before they made major life decisions. We'll need someone to develop and lead this program, Helen pointed out. Someone who understands both sides of the equation. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. I have some ideas about that. The following week, Eleanor invited Lily to join her for an afternoon of baking, a regular activity that had deepened their bond over the past months. As they prepared a complex layer cake together, Eleanor observed her granddaughter's methodical approach, her attention to detail, her questions that demonstrated genuine understanding rather than rote following of instructions. You have a gift for this, you know, Eleanor commented as Lily expertly folded whipped cream into the chocolate filling. Not just the techniques, but the instinct for what works. Lily beamed at the praise. I love learning from you, Grandma. Mom says you're the best teacher because you built everything from experience, not just theory. Your mother is kind to say so, Eleanor smiled. Speaking of teaching, I wanted to ask your opinion about something. The Foundation is developing a new program for high school girls, teaching financial literacy and independence. What do you think would make something like that appealing to your peers? Lily considered the question seriously as she continued folding the mixture with gentle, precise movements. It would need to feel relevant, not just abstract future stuff. And it would help if it came from someone who understands what it's like to be our age now, not 50 years ago. No offense, Grandma. None taken, Eleanor laughed. That's exactly the kind of honest feedback I need. As they finished the cake and cleaned the kitchen, Eleanor found herself reflecting on the journey of the past year. From being told to Find Somewhere Else, by Rebecca, to creating both a new home and a foundation that would impact generations of women. It was a transformation even she hadn't fully anticipated. That evening, after Lily had gone home with Jennifer, Eleanor sat on her front porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the kind of community where neighbors still greeted each other by name and looked out for one another. Her phone rang, displaying Michael's number. They spoke briefly about practical matters: a small repair needed on Eleanor's back steps, the foundation's upcoming grant announcement, before Michael hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Mom, I've been wondering, are you happy? With how everything turned out, I mean." Eleanor considered the question thoughtfully. "I am, Michael. Not because of what happened with Rebecca, that was painful and unnecessary, but because of what grew from it. Sometimes the most difficult experiences create space for unexpected growth." "I wish I'd stood up for you," Michael said, the regret still evident in his voice. "Protected you from how she treated you." "I wish you had too," Eleanor replied. "Honestly. But I've learned something important through all this: at any age, in any circumstance, we can choose our response to what happens to us. Rebecca chose control and dismissal. I chose independence and creation." After ending the call, Eleanor remained on the porch, watching the last light fade from the sky as stars began to appear. The past year had taken her from being told to find somewhere else, to creating exactly that: not just a new physical home, but a new purpose, a new chapter in a life already rich with experience. The foundation's first grants would be announced next week, launching 5 women over 50 into entrepreneurial ventures they had dreamed of but never thought possible. The high school program would begin development in the fall, potentially reshaping how young women viewed financial independence and security. All of this from what had seemed, at the time, like a devastating rejection: being thrown out of her son's home by a daughter-in-law who saw her as nothing more than an inconvenience. Eleanor smiled at the irony. Rebecca had told her to find somewhere else as an act of dismissal and control. Instead, Eleanor had created something far more meaningful than either of them could have imagined: not just a new home, but a legacy that would empower women for generations to come. As darkness settled over Oakridge, lights came on in neighboring houses, creating a tapestry of warmth and community. Eleanor's own home glowed with welcome, a physical manifestation of the independence she had reclaimed and the purpose she had discovered. From her porch, Eleanor could see the future taking shape, not just her own, but the futures of the women her foundation would support, the lives that would be changed because she had refused to be diminished by someone else's narrow vision of her worth. "Find somewhere else," Rebecca had said, thinking it an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning. 2 years after being told to find somewhere else by her daughter-in-law, Eleanor Whitaker stood at the podium in Oakridge Community Center's main hall, surveying the crowd gathered for the Harold Whitaker Foundation's 2nd annual grant ceremony. At 74, she still carried herself with the quiet dignity that had characterized her throughout her life, though she now used a sleek, handcrafted walking stick, not out of necessity, but as what she called insurance against unexpected moments. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice clear and confident. 2 years ago, the Harold Whitaker Foundation began with a simple mission: to empower women over 50 to build financial independence through entrepreneurship. Today, we celebrate not just our newest grant recipients, but the remarkable achievements of our first cohort. Eleanor gestured to the display boards arranged around the perimeter of the hall, each showcasing a successful business launched with the foundation's support: a specialized accounting service for small farms, a home healthcare agency, a custom textile design studio, a culinary tour company, and a tech support service specifically designed for seniors. These 5 businesses have not only survived their crucial first year, Eleanor continued, they've thrived. Collectively, they've created 17 jobs, generated over $500,000 in revenue, and most importantly, provided their founders with the financial independence and sense of purpose that is the cornerstone of our mission. The audience applauded warmly, many of them direct beneficiaries of these new enterprises. Oakridge had experienced something of a renaissance since the foundation began its work, with empty storefronts filling with new businesses and a renewed sense of community purpose emerging. "Today, we announce our second cohort of grant recipients," Eleanor said, picking up an elegant folder embossed with the foundation's logo. 5 more remarkable women who are ready to transform their experience and expertise into thriving enterprises. As Eleanor announced each recipient, Sophia, now the foundation's full-time program director, escorted them to the stage to receive their grant certificates and the symbolic keys that had become the foundation's trademark gift, representing the doors that financial independence could open. From her seat in the front row, Jennifer watched her mother with undisguised pride. As the Foundation's legal advisor, she had witnessed firsthand the impact of Eleanor's vision, not just on the grant recipients, but on the entire community. Patrick sat beside her, his camera capturing the ceremony for the Foundation's website and promotional materials. Michael occupied the seat on Jennifer's other side, his presence at these events now comfortable rather than strained. The past 2 years had been a journey of redemption for him, consistent support of his mother's endeavors, genuine respect for her independence, gradual rebuilding of trust through actions rather than words. The ceremony concluded with the announcement that had generated the most anticipation in the community: the launch of the Foundation's new youth program, Financial Futures, designed to teach high school girls about entrepreneurship, investment, and economic independence. To introduce this initiative, Eleanor said, "I'd like to welcome our new youth program director, Lily Bennett." A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience as Eleanor's granddaughter, now 18 and recently graduated from high school, approached the podium. No longer the uncertain teenager who had witnessed her grandmother's mistreatment 2 years earlier, Lily had blossomed into a poised young woman with clear purpose. "Thank you, Grandma," Lily said with a warm smile before addressing the audience. 2 years ago, I watched my grandmother face a situation that would have broken many people. Instead of becoming bitter or retreating, she built something extraordinary. Not just a new home for herself, but a foundation that has already changed lives throughout our community." Lily gestured to the display boards showcasing the successful businesses. These enterprises aren't just providing services and creating jobs, they're demonstrating what's possible when women are empowered to create their own security rather than depending on others for it. She outlined the Financial Futures program. With impressive clarity, a series of workshops, mentorship opportunities, and hands-on projects designed to help high school girls develop entrepreneurial thinking and financial literacy before they made major life decisions. "We're starting right here in Oakridge," Lily explained, "with 30 participants in our pilot program. But our vision extends much further. We've already received inquiries from neighboring communities asking how they can implement similar programs." As the ceremony transitioned to a reception, Eleanor found herself surrounded by well-wishers, grant recipients past and present, community leaders, friends who had supported her journey from the beginning. She accepted their congratulations with gracious warmth, but her gaze kept returning to Lily, who was enthusiastically explaining the youth program to a group of interested parents. "She's remarkable," Jennifer said, appearing at Eleanor's side. "Deferred her college acceptance for a year to launch this program. Said she couldn't imagine a more valuable education than working alongside you." Eleanor felt a rush of pride, mixed with something deeper, a sense of generational continuity, of values and strength passing from grandmother to granddaughter in a way she had never anticipated. "The program was her idea, you know," Eleanor replied. "I was focused on women my age, but Lily pointed out that changing the narrative has to start earlier. Why wait until women are 50 to teach them what they should have known at 15? She asked. "Hard to argue with that logic." Jennifer laughed softly. "She gets that clarity from you, Mom. The ability to see straight to the heart of an issue." "Perhaps," Eleanor acknowledged. "But she's building something entirely her own with it. That's what matters." As the reception continued, Eleanor made her way to a quiet corner where Michael stood somewhat apart from the crowd, watching the proceedings with thoughtful attention. "It's a remarkable achievement, Mom," he said as she joined him. 2 years ago, who could have imagined all this growing from what happened?" Eleanor noted his careful avoidance of direct reference to Rebecca's actions, not from denial, but from the painful awareness of his own complicity in them. "Life rarely follows the paths we expect, Michael," she said gently. "Sometimes the most painful detours lead to the most important destinations." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.